welcome back to Pass Me the Mic podcast, where our conversations center the experiences of graduate students at the University of Southern California.
For this episode, we will be talking about leadership in higher education as students and working professionals. So before we start, we just like to introduce ourselves and our positionality. So my name is Kim. I'm a Filipina immigrant, first generation, low income, daughter, sister, and a partner.
And I'm Yadira. I'm a first gen, Latina, low SES. I'm able-bodied, and I'm the eldest child of immigrants. And we just want to highlight that, our positionalities, because when we talk about leadership, we'll see historically it was meant for white males. And you can see that because the higher education system was meant to give that privilege, right, and access to higher education to white men. And as two women of color, we just want to make sure that this is where our lens comes from, and this is where we've seen issues, but we also want to highlight the experiences, positive experiences we've seen in our education. And one of the things also as women, right, there is a gender gap in leadership. We've seen it personally, historically. There is women that are gauged different for their leadership styles, are compared to men, but are expected to act differently to men. They can be held to a higher standard in these positions, and still they might be paid less. So that's another issue that we would like to highlight.
Yeah, I also want to add to that about women, not really being in leadership positions. I remember I read this article during our first year in the program, and it just talks about how there's a lot more challenges that women go through. That's why they're not in leadership, because giving birth, and then being expected to take care of the house, raise their children, and for men, they don't have to worry about that, so they can go to work and then pretty much focus on their career and then provide for the family. But then the work that the women have to do on top of wanting to excel in their career, it's just hard, because they're already dealing with so much barriers. And of course we're not super women that we don't run out of energy, just in a day, it's already a lot. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. And just a friendly reminder for anyone new to higher ed, to be a leader or in a leadership position, you do need either a master's degree or a doctorate, so PhD or EDD. And so, right, when Kim was saying that women have to work at home, right, and be the caretakers of the family, it's that work in addition to attaining a PhD or an EDD, and that's something that women or even women of color already do less of. Yeah, passing it back to Kim.
Yeah. So another thing I want to bring with the historical background is this westernized view of leadership. So with leaders, it's always expected that this person is bold and outspoken. But the problem is that it disqualifies people who are mostly from collective, not collective. What is the other word?
Community.
Collectivist culture. Collectivist culture,
yes.
Where some of the leaders might be shy, reserved, quiet, but it doesn't mean that they're not great leaders. Sometimes I've seen it in work experiences where someone who's more reserved will actually come up with a really good idea at the meeting, because they just been taking it all in, all the ideas, what's the problem, and working it out internally. But when they're finally ready to share, it's such a great idea, very well thought out. So I just also want to bring up that perspective.
Yeah, definitely.
So before we continue, I'm just curious, why do we think discussing leadership is important? Why did we even choose this topic?
Yeah, for me, I thought that we were in a special place, right? As master students, we are told to be leaders in our profession. We're young professionals, but we're still students. So in our classroom settings, or it could be even in our workspaces, we're expected to behave like leaders, but also sit back and learn from them and know our place. So it's an interesting field to be in. We're expected to balance it, right? And again, if we have different intersectionalities, we're always balancing those, right? Now we have to balance this power dynamic that is, it's new to me. It's new for me to be a leader in this realm. So it's just interesting to see it being played out.
Yeah, I'm curious with what you said, that how it feels it's a conflict. It's something that you always have to balance as a student and, you know, like being a leader? Like, was there an example or a time that comes to mind?
Yeah, well, one thing for in higher education, right, we're expected to, vocalize and share our points of view and be the voice for our communities and always be that person to hold the torch and kind of know it all. But in my community, I come from like a more traditional Mexican community where women are supposed to be quiet and like keep their opinions to themselves, right? So I'm still balancing that part of my positionality with this new role, right, where I want to be the leader in a setting where we're trying to highlight marginalized voices more, right? But are we taught how to? Are we taught how to disclose that we were trained to be okay with not voicing ourselves and like not being in that setting, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, now you have to because you have a master's degree, right? Like, oh, it's just, for me, that's the balance.
Yeah.
What about with you, Kim?
Yeah, like, so an example that came to mind is, you know, like coming from the Philippines, like being born and raised there, I was always taught to respect elders, respect authority. So now that I'm being taught to, you know, very similar to what you said, you know, being to advocate and, you know, really speak out, like, you know, my ideas. Like, it's hard because I feel like I'm being rude, I'm being disrespectful, although that's not, like, you know, what I'm trying to do. Like, but, you know, there are times that I feel like if there's a conflict or there's something going on, and in my head I'm just like, wait, like, something's off, something's wrong. Like, it's hard for me to say it right away. I feel like I have to, you know, sit with it first and then talk it out, like, with a, you know, like a trusted friend, and then from there, like, decide whether I actually want to voice it out or not. So, you know, usually with, like, I don't know, just like class discussions and, you know, like professors asking for ideas, I feel like it's just hard for me to, like, raise my hand and be like, okay, like, here's my feedback or here's what I'm thinking about. Because again, it feels like for me it's like, am I being disrespectful, or, you know, like, am I asking for too much? Because, like, you know, from the culture that I come from, I feel like that's how I was trained, so it's hard to, like, break out from that.
And then can I ask, for most of these ideas, after you would go back and, right, talk about it with someone and get that, like, community self-reassurance almost, would you go back and share them?
Like, after I get that, I think it really depends. Like, yeah, so depending on, like, what, like, my community or, like, my people, like, have told me in terms of, like, yeah, that's a really good idea, like, go for it. Or if they say, like, okay, I'm glad we have this conversation, but, like, it should just, like, stay between the two of us. Because, you know, sometimes there are ideas that they don't necessarily have to, like, go out there. You know, it's just, like, you know, like, a feeling that I had and or just wanted to, like, share it out loud, but not necessarily have to go to, like, a professor to talk about it. So it really just depends on, like, what it is.
Okay. Nice. And then was there anything else you wanted to add on to why we think talking about leadership is important?
Yeah, so, you know, like, my interest in this topic actually started when I went to the APAHI conference. So, you know, the speaker mentioned that, you know, there weren't enough, like, Asian American, like, female leaders. And it was interesting because before she said that, I was already observing that, you know, they were awarding this Asian American, like, male leaders. And in my head, I was like, wait, like, what about the women, right? Like, where they at?
Yes,
so when she said that, I was like, wait, it makes sense now. Like, you know, like, I'm already observing it, and they also, like, said it. So I was just like, it makes sense. Although, you know, I also just, like, want to say that it's such a big stride for the Asian American community to have, you know, their leaders be awarded. You know, it's such a big thing. So, you know, like, that's an accomplishment. But, you know, upon acknowledging that, there's still work to do, which is, you know, bringing the Asian American women to light as well.
And then, so, like, I know we briefly talked about leadership and, like, our workspaces, but are there any examples that you want to share? I know we might have good and bad ones that we're willing to share. Is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, so the first thing is that when I was working at the Norman Topping Student Aid Fund, so my supervisor at that time, you know, I just really loved that she encouraged and remind me to take breaks. Because, you know, at the beginning I was just, like, scared to do that. I was like, is this okay? Like, although I do have the rights to, like, a 15-minute break, you know, besides from, like, my lunch break. So if she sees that, you know, I haven't gotten up from my seat, like, she would just, you know, check in with me and be like, hey, like, have you taken a break? You know, like, it's nice outside, you know, it's nice and windy, like sunny, whatever. And she would just encourage me to do that. And, you know, like, I think it was something that she did, like, on a daily, like, whenever I'm in the office. And it made me think that, you know what, it's actually okay to take a break, because, you know, she tells me all the time. And then another thing that she would do is actually model it for me. So you know, there were times that I would just hear her get frustrated with the work that she was doing. She's just like, oh my gosh, I'm just like going round and round, like, with all this like tabs, like, let me actually take a walk. And I would see her, like, you know, she would take a walk,
a hot girl
you know?
walk.
Yes, like, she would, like, you know, wear her like USA shoes and her sun hat and then shades, and then she would go. Like, another thing that was like surprising for me is, like, sometimes she would actually go for a run.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she was like, I'm gonna go for a run, and I'm just like, okay, you do you, hot girl. Like, you know, like, it was just so cool, because from my previous work experience, like, my supervisor, like, hardly, like, left her office. So that also made me think I should be doing the same. You know, I should always be busy, like, always trying to find something to work on. So it was hard for me to take breaks, you know, with that previous, like, work experience, because I just thought that the more that I'm on my desk, the harder that I was working.
Yeah.
Although that wasn't the case, because sometimes I'm just, like, staring, and, you know, like, because there's no meeting at the moment, or I already finished my tasks, you know, because some tasks don't really take the whole day to get done.
You're right. And like what you said, like, you saw it, so you thought you had to do it, right? Yeah.
So I think that's why I was like, leadership is really important to talk about, and, you know, like, seeing the good and the bad, because it's like, you know, I don't know how aware they are, but they are creating the culture, because then
They are.
you know, whatever I'm doing, I'm basing it on them. It's like, oh, what is my leader doing?
That's a great point.
Yeah. What about you? Do you have like, what is your example of, like, seeing leadership in your workplace?
Yeah. I remember the first real, almost at that point, I felt so new to what being a leader was. I saw this, right, even though he was still my supervisor, I felt him be more of a mentor to me, because he would share, you know, times where he was, like, not feeling it, right? Like, he would take breaks, like you mentioned, and, like, share, like, you know, right now I can't, like, I need to take a break, and I'm going through it, and it's okay to give myself some time. And I was like, wow, that's great. And then he was aware of when I would need maybe more support, because I struggle asking for help.
Yeah.
So especially, you know, it being like my supervisor, I'm shy. Like, I wouldn't ask my supervisor for help. My first go-to would be like my coworkers, or like my peers, right, my friends, for help. But like him just being aware of, like, oh, let me backtrack. He would ask me, what is a sign that I need to see so that I know you need help from me? Because he knew it's hard for me to ask for help. So I said, when I'm a little bit more quiet, or maybe I'm not as, like, funny or engaging, that might be a sign where I'm very stressed, and it's because I need help, and I can't ask for help.
Like, you can't vocalize that.
But he asked what are signs that he should be aware of, so that he can reach out and help me, because that's something I struggle with.
Yeah.
And in that situation, I completely saw leadership as, like, a different thing. I felt it when they're like, oh, you're new young professionals. Once you leave the master's program, we're colleagues. I felt that with that specific supervisor. And this was at UCI. In that realm.
I love that, because I feel like, you know, you said that, you know, I can't really use words to, like, ask for help. But then, you know, this person was like, okay, what's another way, you know, I can read that you are asking for help, that you need help, but you can't vocalize it. So I was just like, dang, like, that's so cool. You know, they really thought, I don't know, I feel like it's like thinking outside the box.
It is, yeah, because I know, like, in my current position, right, my supervisor, I wouldn't say makes her a bad, you know, boss or anything, but maybe she'll say, oh, like, let me know if you need help. And then I've mentioned, oh, like, you know, sometimes I struggle asking for help, but thank you, like, I know you'll be there. And it's been a few times, right, where we kind of, like, say the same thing, or she's like, oh, let me know if you need help, even though I'm working on projects, and, like, like, I do look stressed, and I know she has a lot on her plate, which is maybe why I'm a little bit more nice when I should be a little bit more, right, critical of what she's showing me of what a leader is. But I'm like, if one supervisor, one boss in one higher ed setting was able to do it and the other one isn't, like, like, what does that show me?
Right. Yeah. But that's the thing. I think you brought up a good point in a sense of like, you know, we understand that our leaders are like, you know, typically busy. So we kind of give them that benefit of the doubt or just like sweep it under the rug that it's like, all right, like they're not being a great leader to me right now, but you know, they also have so much on their plate. So, you know, like maybe that's okay. But then if you're always busy, like, you know, during the year because, you know, our students have a lot of needs or, you know, there's just like reports that you got to do, then when can they show good leadership?
That's true.
Right? So I was just like, dang. Because it also just made me think of my supervisor at UCSD where, you know, pretty much for her perspective is that, you know, if you need help, reach out. If you don't, then I would assume you're good. But, you know, like, but we're thinking about, but what if I don't know how to say it? Or I'm scared or I'm just like trying to suck it up until like I explode, you know, like, what about that intervention there?
Yeah. And that's like where I definitely see like, us being like first gen, not just students, but first gen professionals is like screaming out, right? Like, we don't know how to ask for help. We don't know how to like be better because we clearly want to be better. We clearly want to do our job well. But like, how do we get there?
Yeah. Oh, I love this. So with that, like, do you also want to give examples of bad leadership that you have experienced? Or do you feel like, you know, what we just talked about right now already covers that?
I do think there's a lot of examples of bad leadership. I know for me, one big thing that I won't get into too much detail, but it's like we're in higher ed, so we serve students. So when leadership is maybe too busy running around and they forget that their goal is to serve the students, or it's like a surface level help the students, support the students, then it's like, okay, I don't think you're in the leadership role that you need to be at, or you need to reevaluate why you're there. Yeah, because we're here for the students. Yeah. But also, like, let's be real. Like, right now you're thinking about other things and other important things, but let's get grounded again.
Yeah. Like, you know, you just saying that just made me think about, like, you know, why some people like refuse to take a break when that's what they need to be able to just, you know, like replenish their soul, you know, be good again at like what they do. Because I feel like you know, a lot of people in higher ed are, you know, like sometimes they do a bad job, not because they're not passionate. I think it's because they're burnt out. You know, because just thinking about like student needs and how for most of the time, you know, we have to wear multiple hats in order, you know, to serve our students well. But yet there's still students who falls like on the crack. And that continues. And then sometimes we don't get that support from our leaders. And then we continue to like expand ourselves and, you know, wear more hats in order to like do whatever it is that we need to do. But yet like we just don't take that break, or like they just don't take that break.
Yeah, they don't.
I'm just like, why not?
Oh my gosh. Well, like, now moving on, we talked a lot about how we are in like the professional realm, right, with our work experience.
Yes.
What about what we see here as students with our professors? Is there anything that stands out to you?
Ooh, that's a really good question. And thank you for bringing us back in at USC. I know we have a lot of like experiences. So in terms of leadership in our professors, one that I wanted to give a shout out to is when Dr. Cortez like handled this incident at the international dance like classroom. So, you know, it was like after his class, and then it was still early, you know, so the building closes at 10. We were able to get out at like 9:35, but then the student workers were already like shoving us out, you know, and it just like felt so rude. It just felt like, oh, like I don't belong here, you know. It felt like we're outsiders and we're not supposed to be there at that time or ever. And you know, like me and other students like mentioned that to Dr. Cortez, and Dr. Cortez like took action and asked us, you know, like, hey, can you all like write about it? And then, you know, I'll gather them and then send it to someone that that needs to like, you know, see this and like listen to this. And I know like he went through like hurdles and like getting that done, but ultimately like he had to be the one like doing the process. So basically what happened is that, you know, we were heard, like the leadership at the international dance like classroom knew that it was their bad, and we were able to keep the classroom. So just that, where, you know, like I feel like he could have just been like, like, y'all are overacting, just go
Uh-huh.
home, it's late.
Uh-huh.
But for him to be like, nope, like, let's gather like your voices, like what y'all experience, and let's bring it to the leadership. So I really appreciate him for that. And just like the urgency of him doing it, like, when we talk about it to him like that night, the next day he already sent an email, like, trying to gather like data from like what happened.
That's true. He really said, I'm gonna center my students' voices, and I'm gonna do it now.
Yeah. And I know there were pushbacks, right? Like,
Yes.
They were like, oh, just go back to the basement, just have your classroom there, so you don't have this clash with the international dance like students. But no, he was like, no, that's just us giving in if we do that. And also the basement sucks, like.
Yes. And we're paying all the same tuition.
Yeah.
Whether we're if we're in the basement, because a few of our classes are in the basement, versus this really beautiful, well furnished, like, you could smell the privilege in the dance center. Like, it's so nice. Like, no, we should have class there if you want it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, just like seeing how nice their bathroom is as well, with the light and the mirrors. Like, they have a full body mirror. Where can you see that at Rosier building?
Nowhere.
Yeah. What about you? Like, how have you seen leadership in our professors?
There's a few, right, that like stand out, and I will say I was surprised about the amount of diverse professors we have in our program, so I'll shout out that. I do think that's one thing I wasn't seeing in other programs, and I specifically want to highlight one of our class cohort favorites is Dr. Ocampo, Dr. O. I really have never seen someone in like a teaching role and like a leadership role be so centered in like love and just sharing his love with all of our students, not in a creepy way at all.
Yeah.
Like in a way that shows that he cares and he empathizes with like us and our struggles and like our authenticity, and like he feels so real in doing it.
Yeah.
And he does it in every sense of the way. Like, whether it's typing an email, he'll call you your dearest. Again, not in a creepy way, I swear. It's with great intentions. And then even just when he addresses you, it's like, yes, he's actively listening and he remembers what you will talk about. And it's like, the separation of church and state, right? This is like, no, like the separation of education and love shouldn't be separate. Like he says that education is like an act of love, right?
Yeah.
That when you're teaching someone, it's an act of love. And so to see that in this setting, like right in the middle of downtown where it's like rustling and bustling, like there's still someone that is grounding you in yourself and like allowing you to be true to yourself and like be kind to yourself, that I'm grateful for.
Yeah. I love that. And I just like want to add to an experience I had with Dr. O as well, because I've taken his classes and just have interacted with him. I just love the first time that he reached out to me. I don't remember if I was already taking a class with him, but we were at an event. He reached out to me and he just said like, hey, like I have this like APIDA group, like for like Asian Americans, like for USC grad students. It's a space that he holds like outside, like the classrooms. They meet up at the restaurant, talk about live experiences, and just have that community bonding. I don't remember if I signed up for it, like honestly, but he reached out to me and said like, hey, I think this will be a great space for you. And that time they were meeting on a Friday, and I was just like, well, like I already had Friday plans, in my head, but I was like, you know what, like he made this effort to like go to me and invite me to this and making me really feel like you should really go, like this is a great space. And I was like, you know what, like let me give it a chance. So whatever I was doing that Friday, I was just like, I would just go see Dr. O and his space and see what's up. And you know what, like it was a great choice. Like I really love just being around other like APIDA students in the EC program. I met a lot of like the second years at that time. I was the first year, and just being able to hear live experiences that I really connect with and like in a deeper level, like I really appreciate that. So
thank you.
Just wanted to add that.
And briefly want to highlight Dr. Whedon, just because she showed me how to be critical of higher education institutions and be real about it. And like just quick highlight for her, because I do think now being like a student and like I'm always being aware of what's going on and like, okay, like let's be real. Why is this going on? Why is this a problem?
Yeah.
And
I love that.
yeah, just being critical of everything in a good way.
Also, shout out to Dr. Hernandez.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Not biased.
Oh, that biased. I know she's not listening. But for Dr. Hernandez, always like bringing food to our classrooms because, like sometimes like some of us wouldn't have time to eat, because like we're coming from work and there's like traffic in LA. And, it just gets really hectic. So, so for that to be something that she does like every single time. And then also like introducing to us this topic of like subaltern voice and just like hearing that topic, I was just like, dang, like it really emphasized like the wisdom that we already have, and it's something that we don't learn from the books, it's just something that we lived it, so we know it. And she's centering like that voice, and I think even for this final to be developed, right, like it was like that community effort, that classroom effort that we're like, hey, we want to do something else aside from writing a paper and citing like scholarly work, like we want to talk about like how we've been doing this program, like what have we been learning, and she provided that space along with Dr. O. But for us to come up with this type of project, it's because of those like influences that started early on. So shout out to Dr. H.
Yes, all these people made us feel calm and comfortable to be ourselves. And
all right, to wrap it up, Yadira, what is the wisdom we can give to others on leadership based on our lived experiences and just reimagining the future?
That's a loaded question.
Yes, definitely loaded.
So I think, at least like for me, how I'm gonna pass on my words of wisdom is kind of like how I made it, right? How I feel like I led a positive impact as a leader, as a student leader, as a leader in the workplace. Both of those is just taking what I've learned, exactly what you said earlier about centering like community and centering like our own knowledge, right, that we have from just like our lived experience into these spaces. So I love the idea of bringing food and bringing like music and bringing spaces where like people feel safe. And my past experience as like a community engagement coordinator clearly shines through, because I'm always like, this is too quiet. Like we need to put some music, and then I'll like make like a playlist and like be like, students, like, what do you want to listen to? As long as it's, not even PG appropriate. What's that word? It's like, as long as it's like semi-appropriate and then makes you happy, we'll play it. But just like allowing spaces that provide like how I feel comfortable at home, which is like people talking, people are being loud, people are feeling safe, and there's food, there's music, right? Like that's what I know, and that's what I'm bringing into these spaces. And from what I've seen, like students appreciate when I do that.
Yeah. I love that. I think I have a very similar like wisdom that I also like want to share with everyone is, just like bring your damn self to the table, like whatever that means. So I know for me, like I'm just like following my interests in like, Asian Americans and, doing research on that, presenting, bringing my experiences into class discussions, because it's something that, I was ashamed, I was scared to like share back then, because depending on the classroom makeup, if there's not a lot of Asian Americans, then I'm always so hesitant to share, because then I feel like my lived experiences is something that wouldn't be understood, or they would just say like, okay, cool perspective, but like no one really knows like how to add to that. So those are the times that I feel like it's just kind of like dismissed. But now it's like, whether it's something that's understood or not, like, for me to still bring it, because even though no one can add to it, it's like at least I was able to say it. I was able to like represent like myself, and whoever can relate to it like will relate, and that still says power, and there's still impact, even if I don't see it right away. So I know with like Asian Americans, we struggle a lot with like invisibility in the curriculum, although there's a lot of Asian Americans in higher ed. So one way I'm doing that is like bring my like Filipino immigrant like perspective in the classroom whenever it's like relatable. Like of course I'm not just gonna bring it when it's not, but just having like a piece of that, because it's like, why would I wait until USC like does it for me when I can do it for myself, and continuing that work. So
that's true.
Like they said, like be that change that you want to see in the world, but for me it's also like be yourself in the spaces that you're in.
I love that. And leaders that are like that, whether I identify with them or not, I will love them.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of the leaders we identified in our program, I don't identify with all of them at all.
Yeah.
But I still respect them, and I think they're doing great with who they are because they're authentic.
Yeah, and you know that's what I love about it. And you know, there's always like a lot more perspective like out there, and I don't think we need to be, you know, narrow-minded about it and just like be selective on like, you know, who we hear it from, because again, it's like at the end of the day, it's like, you know, life is like how we interpret it. So like, you know, there's just like so much perspective like out there that we can absorb, but of course we can still you know, we can still be smart about like, okay, who do we actually like follow?
Yeah.
Because that still affects like who we are as people.
It does,
and how we show up.
Yeah. And then just like this podcast is called Passing the Mic, it's like when we become these leaders and we become those people that hopefully others look up to and respect, we'll be there for them and help them develop into those leaders too.
Yes. Let them just be authentic and, you know, let themselves shine.
Be the high person for the new generation, for the new students.
Exactly.
Alrighty.
Thank you all for listening.
Thanks for listening.